Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Swamp Thing, as well as the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time and I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Swamp Thing, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Swamp Thing. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode. Obviously, we have like Susie being possessed by Shauna's ghost. Now, I'm wondering, is this a situation? Because at first I was actually going to be like, oh, she's going to go from go to Susie, and then she's going to go to Maria. I thought that's how that was going to go. Totally didn't go that way. Like I said, I'll get to that soon enough. But it was kind of interesting because I'm wondering, did she go specifically to Susie? Because obviously Susie's kind of connected to all this. She's connected to whatever's going down. Once again, because it seems like she's the only one that's been infected with everything that has her connection to Alex. So maybe that's just a special one-way thing. But I was wondering, did that open her up to kind of the supernatural world? Did it actually make it easier for Shauna to possess her because she's kind of like a antenna kind of drawing in signals like that? Or was it just because of proximity and stuff like that, and just because of the state that Shauna's in, she did that? But it's like Shauna's not coming at this as like, oh, like, you know, Casper the Friendly Ghost. She's a full-on vengeful spirit. Then, like, obviously Maria's kind of a part of it too, because like the moment like Susie calls over Abby and everything, and then like the way that, you know, Maria was talking, I was like, you know, that's Shauna. Like, it's not like, oh, it's all like, you know it, because the way she's like, oh, you know how she always is. Like, once she's got something in her head, I'm like, you're not talking about Susie. And you're just like, oh no, go up, she can't wait to see you. And obviously Abby doesn't really she thinks, because at first she thinks it's Maria being kind of a dick and being like, oh, telling her all this stuff just to hurt her, like all this stuff about Shauna just to kind of bother her. But obviously, even with what Abby sees, she kind of still doesn't believe it, just because, I mean, which is crazy considering all that, you know, she's slowly reaching that point in her mind where she's like, oh yeah, everything that's going around Maria right now, it's like, of course it's gonna be a thing of like, there's something going on here. Even to the point, looking at all, you know, the stuff related to Alex, she's like, maybe we're kind of going to the scope of beyond science, or just everything that's going down recently. But she doesn't want to cross that line to be like ghosts. It's always harder, you know, because there's always that explanation of science could explain a lot. But for the ghosts, it's always that little hump for someone to kind of deal with that. But to be fair, I mean, you literally dealt with an infectious darkness last episode, but you know, it's once again, it's still just kind of hard to wrap your head around, you know. And so, like, it's obviously, it seems like, oh, she wants to punish Abby because she's like, oh, it's actually your fault why I died and everything. And Maria, you know, is snapping at Abby and being like, oh, like, the fact of the matter is, I'm not going to let you take Shauna away from me again. And so, because it turns out, because obviously in Maria's head, it's like, oh, Xanadu brought her back to me, but Xanadu's the one who's like, I figured as much. Like, Xanadu had nothing to do with that necessarily. In her case, she's like, I opened the door, but she's like, honestly, Shauna was going to come back one way or another without my help, even with or without my help. And I kind of see that because because if I remember correctly, Shauna already popped up to Maria way before Xanadu did her particular thing that, like, you know, things kind of changed and shifted. Like, but the thing is, like, I think Xanadu just ended up, you know, because obviously she was trying to help someone who's grieving a lost child and everything. But I think it was a situation of, it just made it a little easier because I guess when Xanadu what she did, she connected Shauna's spirit with Maria. Like, that pain was already keeping her around, but now it just kept her feeding her and continuing to, like, draw on that darkness. Like, it made her kind of like, she fed off that pain and that darkness, and herself had been twisted by the darkness. Because it's interesting, because all this kind of ties into Alec, because Alec runs into that random dude who's in the woods. It's like, okay, what the hell is that? Dude's popping up and then disappearing like nothing. But he has a lot of answers for Alec, and I like the breakdown of it, because obviously Alec's like, what's going on with me? Because obviously the trees are showing him dead bodies and stuff. He's like, what is this? It's like, it's not showing him like ghosts, it's showing him memories, because it's like the trees have been there for a long time, their memories go way back, and you know, they want to show Alec things so that he can prepare for the future, because obviously history will have a tendency of repeating. So it's like, she's trying to warn you is what this was all about. One of the particular memories he ended up getting warned about was one concerning Abby, because the dude was like, the fact is they're trying to warn you about someone close to you being affected by all this. And you know, obviously that turns out to be Abby. But what I also like, because obviously, like, it's like, you're not afraid of me. And the fact is, he's so being like, okay, like, maybe Alec isn't the first of his kind, potentially, or like what's happening to him. Maybe the woods have, you know, like I said, because it feels more so like it isn't just like, oh, the chemicals and stuff like that. It seems like the swamp chose him to be its protector, to be not just the protector of, you know, the swamp itself, but also Murray. It seems like it needs someone to fight back the tides of darkness, and it seems like they chose their champion. So the question then becomes like, you know, was this guy that's there, like, is he supposed to be kind of like an advisor for the champions or anyone that's in this particular situation? Once again, maybe people haven't taken on the form that Alec has, because I do know, like, because I looked it up, I didn't know this, like, I think there's multiple people that have been Swamp Thing in the comic books, so we could be dealing with a situation kind of like, you know, just like, you know, depending on what continuity you want to look at and stuff like that, like, obviously multiple people have taken up the moniker of the Flash, for example, so it could be like a, you know, passing of the torch type of situation, not necessarily in this dude's case, or maybe exactly in this case, maybe he was exactly in Alec's case years and years ago or something like that. It'd be kind of interesting, but I like what he was basically like, oh, do I have to be afraid of you? He's like, and Alec's like, not of who I was, but what I'm becoming. He's like, the fact of the matter is, yes, you know, transition's always not the easiest thing, whether it's a caterpillar going to a butterfly or a child going to an adult, but the fact of the matter is, what always matters is your heart. No one can take that away from you, because that will always be who you are. As the only person that could ever take that away is you. So like, if you are still true to who you are as Alec, no one can ever take that away from you, no matter what form you look like. You will always be Alec. I mean, and I think Abby is definitely one of those people that still sees that, you know? So, obviously, like, you know, we also found out some interesting stuff, too, that Abby isn't really on the best of terms with Xanadu. And well, rather, it's more the other way, that Xanadu's not on good terms with Abby, because Abby, basically, in Abby's mind, it's like you doing what you do, kind of, it's almost like you're filling people's heads with hope and stuff like that. Like, and it seems like with her, it seems like her mom, Anissa, like, had a lot of trouble. Like, maybe it was something related to Abby's dad, but it's kind of like, oh, you kept feeding into it, and rather than giving her real help, and I mean, maybe it's about her dad, maybe it's kind of like a tragic thing that, you know, Abby lost her dad in a tragedy, and her mom just wanted to kind of connect with him, or maybe Abby actually had a sibling or something that I don't know. I'm assuming it has to do with her father, because that's just something that hasn't come up before. Once again, this is the first time her parents got brought up. Well, in particular, one parent, but still. So that kind of explains that. And then like the whole Maria and Shauna thing, Shauna trying to draw her in, but obviously Maria's still consumed by her pain and everything. And Abby's like, okay, it was me, it was my fault, I'm so sorry. And it's like, you're sorry. And then she proceeded to try and drown Abby. Then Abby managed to get away, but then Shauna starts drowning Maria, so it's like, dude. But fortunately, Alec was able to get there in time, and he ends up showing Abby the memory that he saw that brought him there. And it turns out, like, because at first I was like, okay, I was like, oh, that sucks. Like, Shauna died because it was in an accident. Like, Abby pushed her off the bridge and everything, but she immediately dove in after her. But it was a situation of like, oh man, like, you know, it was just kids messing around. You shouldn't blame her. And it's like, oh, Shauna came back up. I was like, okay, so what's about to happen to her then if she came back up and she was fine? It's like something dragged her. It wasn't Abby that killed her that day. It was something else. And I guess because she was so young at the time, you know, it happened so fast, she kind of blamed herself. It's like, oh, she would have never been in that situation if I hadn't pushed her into the water. But it's like, yeah, there were kids messing around. But, I you know, because obviously Maria, once again, pushed all her hate towards, you know, Abby, blaming her for everything. And it's a situation of there was something there. Like, obviously in Murray, there's always been something there, and whatever it is, it got Shauna that day. And obviously that thing is what's twisting all the spirits in Murray, like turning them dark and twisted, like Shauna, grabbing onto them and never letting go. So, because that's the thing, it only happened now, Shauna's spirit popping up and everything, because the doorway, I guess the veil between the living and the dead, that doorway is, obviously it got open even more because of Xanadu, but it was already creaking and creeping open anyway. So I think that speaks volumes in itself, because I guess, once again, like I brought up before, maybe like Murray is on some ley lines type of stuff, so like the supernatural world kind of really kicks up in that particular part of the world or something like that. Maybe. But also, part of me thought like maybe like Abby didn't say anything back then because she figured no one would believe her, and maybe she did say something back then, but they were like, "Oh, she's just trying to cover up from," So maybe she kind of kept that buried. But then, like like I said, things happen so fast and everything. Adrenaline's flooding. She probably thought her mind was playing tricks on her. But now looking back on it, it's like no, something took Shauna. So it isn't on her. There was something else at play here that killed her. Once again, because Shauna's spirit isn't thinking rationally. Like no, you had no. It's like no, it's just it's twisted in darkness. She's been probably consumed in that darkness for 14 years, so obviously she's just going to lash out at Abby, but trying to even kill her own mom just so she doesn't have to be alone anymore, so that in itself is interesting. We have Jason being so like, oh my god, like he's so fascinated by what's going on with the sample that Abby has. He was under the impression it was maybe like a small animal or a plant or something, but then he got a piece of the sample and now realized it, and he saw footprints. It's like, no, we're looking for something big and living, so that changes a lot of things about how he approaches this thing, because I love that he kind of like, oh yeah, the only scientist, and he's like, oh, I say that like blah 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 blah, trying to shit on like Alec as a scientist or whatever, being like, oh, he's the only one close enough to like a scientist in this area, so does this have anything to do with Alec? And Abby didn't tell him, because I was wondering if Abby was going to work with him, but not really. Like I guess she wanted to get someone else's perspective on it, but then eventually she was probably like, you know what, I'm not going to worry about that. Once again, Jason kind of fueling what I thought, because he was like, oh, the fact this could help people with their diseases and stuff like that, the regenerative property of this material and stuff like that. I'm like, right. Once again, we go back to his wife, like her like dementia or Alzheimer's, like there's stuff with her brain because her memory and stuff like that was fading. So it's like, yeah, it's for research purposes in the sense of like, oh, his name, but I think more so than anything it's about helping his wife. Obviously Avery's more in this for the moolah, but still. So what was really interesting though was at the end when Avery's there and he's Jason's talking to him, and like rather than rushing to Maria's side, which he was trying to, but then the moment Jason brought up like, oh yeah, the blah 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 blah, this creature is living and stuff like that, and it's like, I need it alive and stuff like that if you still want to go through the project and everything, and it's like, okay, and he's giving him the name of a hunter and stuff like that, which I'm wondering, is that supposed to be Matt or something? Maybe not, but we'll get to that, why I suggest that soon enough. Like that was kind of an interesting thing, like I said. But you see the look on Maria's face upon them talking and stuff like that, and part of me wonders, is it supposed to be the conversation of, one, the fact of the matter is you're trying to talk to him more so rather than try to come see me, like I come second place to work essentially. That's one thought process. Another thought process could be like, well, it kind of ties in. It could be the fact is that she does realize, because at the time she's like, oh, thanks for making this happen with, Susie being in the house. And it's like, no, I should be thanking you. You're funding his projects to keep, Susie healthy and everyone, blah, blah, blah. His excuse behind the whole Susie situation to get funding from Maria. But I think Maria's kind of piecing it together, be like, this was all part of your plan. I think when she looks at them together like that made her kind of click. So I think it's maybe those two things potentially. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what the conversation is going to look like next time regarding them. Maybe Maria isn't going to look at it like that. Maybe just like the inklings of that are starting to show. Either way. And since we are talking about Avery, obviously him and Lucilia, their affair and everything, which is interesting because it seems like that existed even before the whole him and Maria thing. It seems like he kind of left that love behind the moment Maria kind of came around, because it's like, oh, like the fact that essentially one of the big motives being her money. And it's like Avery probably was always kind of like, his ambitions and his dreams and just to be kind of upper class, like Maria presented that opportunity. So it seems like even the relationship wasn't the most honest of things. It just seemed like he was more interested in other things she could give him status wise, so. And sadly, it seems like that's still the case, because even now he's just utilizing her for her money. Like, obviously, he'll probably argue, like, oh, I'd love. There's a questionable area in that regard, but still. Then there's a whole Alec conversation, because Liz keeps bugging the sheriff about it, but she doesn't want to listen, because it's like, no, like, whatever, this supposed murderer will look into it. I'll get back to her side of things soon enough, but then like Avery threatening Liz and her dad, Delroy, being like, oh yeah, me, the fact is, like, people come out the woodwork to kind of bring me down, just when I'm trying to, land the proverbial white whale. And Delroy knows exactly what Avery was getting at, but Liz shows up in time to be like, I got this, Dad, don't worry. He's be like, I'm right outside. And it's like, oh, you're trying to threaten my dad? That's not going to stop me from coming after you. And Avery kind of snaps a little bit, all while cooking turtle soup, which I've heard of people talk about it being good or whatnot, and I can never do that. I don't know. I couldn't do that to her. I can't do it to a turtle. That's all. I'll just leave it at that. Because I like, him snapping at her, because Liz is kind of like, oh yeah, like, what about Gordon? He's going missing and stuff like that. Just when I was getting to him about the fact is, in the bogus loans and stuff to your corporation. And then the whole Alex situation. And he's like, all right, what do you have? You have absolutely nothing. Stay out of my way, essentially. I hate things, for your father's sake, for your own sake. But Liz is like, the fact of the matter is, back in the day when the Sutherlands would snap their fingers, they'd have a little more weight, basically. Everyone in town would jump. But that time has passed. Stay away from my father. Liz ain't going to, she ain't going to bow down to Avery. Which, later on, Avery sends some thugs to kind of attack her. She defends herself pretty well. Daniel kind of gets involved and he gets hit over the head. It's like, oh crap, you might have killed him, and they run away, which we'll get to that soon enough. Let's circle back to it, interestingly enough. Like, obviously, I wondered what Daniel meant by the fact that he couldn't leave town. I was like, is there literally going to be a force field preventing you to leave town? Kind of like some Once Upon a Time situation with Storybrooke, in certain regards of the story. Kind of, but a little worse. Rather than just kind of a force field to kind of keep you in, it literally burns him. I wonder if that's supposed to be like hellfire or something, because that's typically what that is, like when the flame is blue like that. It's like, isn't that supposed to be like phosphorus flame or something like that? It's what that's supposed to be. Either way, so that's interesting. Because Daniel's trying to figure everything out. He's like, I made this deal and everything. And he looks and he's just like, oh, I wish I had never done that. Like, it wasn't even worth it. In his trunk, you see, it seems like there's a cloak and a monster demon mask. And I'm like, I feel like I know who he's supposed to be. Maybe it's not the case. There's this creature, I want to say this is a DC thing. I feel like I remember this thing kicking it with the Justice League or something like. It's like this gargoyle demon-like creature. It's kind of got like yellowish skin. Like, I think it wears like a red robe and kind of like a cloak, a cape, kind of like the cloak he has. So I'm wondering, is that who he's supposed to be? I do not know this character's name. In my head, I kept referring to it as kind of a goblin. I don't know if it is a goblin. It might be straight up a demon, but I wonder, is that who he's supposed to be? The mask is glowing and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, so it's that. Is that something is it kind of like, Jim Carrey's The Mask, where he can like take it off and go back to being human? Because like I said, I feel like I vaguely remember the character from Justice League or something like that, but I'm not that well versed. I knew he had to be somewhat important with this whole like being a hero thing that Xanadu kept talking about. So it's like, was it something that he took up and then he kind of let go? Or is it just kind of part of the dealings of his hero tale? Like, is it like, I'm curious, like what that whole situation is. I find it fascinating, like, to kind of really dive into what the hell that's all about. I'm also wondering, is like him getting hit over the head with a, like that, and that, like, would that be? Because I was about to say, because he doesn't heal fast because his arm is still super burned. To be fair, maybe that's just because blue flames and everything work a little differently than like a regular mortal wound. Or maybe, like I said, I'm curious if he's just like a normal human and he got this because like the mask actually starts glowing like blue and like the eyes and stuff. So it's like, okay, so it's like, is it kind of alive? Is it kind of like a Dr. Fate situation where that thing is, because like in Dr. Fate case, like the helmet is its own entity. Like, when it takes, like, it kind of acts on its own. So I'm curious, does the same thing kind of apply where it's like that thing, that mask in itself is a creature, its own essence, and obviously it fuses onto him when he puts it on. I'm curious to kind of dive down that path to find out like what the hell that's about, but still. A lot of interesting stuff went down in this episode. Oh my god, I'm literally about to forget the other big thing I almost forgot to talk about. Was the whole Lucilia situation. She goes to Remy, and Remy's like, oh yeah, I saw all that Alex situation go down. Oh, who would have known it was your boy? I was like, what? Matt? It would have never crossed my mind to even possibly consider the person who killed Alec was Matt. If anything, I was, like I said, I would have thought it was Sunderland himself. We saw that he's not afraid to get his hands dirty, but a lot of times, like, why, if I don't have to, why do it? So the question then becomes, like, because the fact is, Remy even brings it up, it's like, oh, he was in Sunderland's boat, so it's like, oh, so Matt's working for Sunderland, is Avery, so is it a situation of, like, he owes Avery something, so he did this, or, you know, does he believe in what Avery's doing, so he's backing every play that he has? I don't know. I find that so fascinating. And to the fact is that Lucilia would do what she did. She put poor Remy down, unload a few bullets, then kind of mercilessly put up that newspaper and then put a bullet in his head. It's like, Jesus. Because it's like, don't you ever... No one's going to, like, what was she said? I think she said no one's going to fucking threaten my son or whatever. It's like, Jesus. I mean, we've seen how, even last episode, how passionate she gets about her son and stuff like that. He's kind of her world, her everything. I mean, to be fair, it's any parent would react like that, but obviously you see the parallels between her and Maria. But that was fascinating. So now that's going to be something I know Lucilia is going to cover up, because because obviously she needs to appease Liz, because Liz is going to keep pushing for this. And I'm like, okay, I already see it. Next episode, because obviously she's got to go to be like, oh my god, like, he pulled a gun on me, because he did have the shotgun and everything, so she's going to be like, oh, I was trying to protect myself, it was self-defense. It's kind of like, well, he got the bullets in his chest, and the headshot makes you go, I don't know if that's necessary, but I mean, it'll probably look good. She is the sheriff, so I don't know, there's going to be a whole bunch of people to really doubt her in that regard, but she's going to make it so that it seemed like Remy was the one that killed Alex. Because part of me was wondering, could it just be a situation that, like, oh, Matt was just happened to be out there or whatever. But then he points out, oh, Matt also had dynamite on the boat too. I'm like, right. And the whole him riding Sutherland's boat. It's like, right. Yeah. But I'm definitely expecting that to be how Lucilia handles this, blaming it all on Remy. I'm wondering who she's going to question first, Matt or Avery. I doubt she's gonna. Well, maybe she does question Matt, but it's like, no, don't matter, baby. I'm. No matter what you did, I'm gonna look after you. I'm gonna take care of you. I did what I had to do. Maybe she'll go off on Avery, especially because of the complicated thing of like, oh, we're having this affair, and then you make my son do this and that. You put my son in that situation, and now Avery probably can blackmail her into helping him. It's like, okay, so your son won't be involved anymore. You got to do the dirty work for him, or something like that. I don't know. I'm curious, like, what potentially he has on Matt. Like I said, not unless we end up finding out Matt, like, wholeheartedly believes in Avery. Like, I'm curious, not unless he's getting paid off of this. Like, what makes it so that he works for Avery? Hopefully we get those answers in the next episode. I'm very interested to see where all this ends up taking us. Once again, the show just continues to be spooky, and I'm loving it. And now moving on to this week's episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First, let's focus on Fitz and Simmons and Enoch's story. I love they end up going back to Kitson. I love the moment just like everyone looks at them when they teleport in and they're just like, and that's enough of that. Let's go back to what we were doing before. Obviously, they get captured by the dude who runs the place, Kitson, played by Anthony Michael Hall. I was like, oh yeah, because I saw his name in the credits in the opening. I thought that was kind of interesting. But nevertheless, I love they're trying to like, oh, good, let's, because obviously he's pissed at them because, they brought a synthetic in his business. And, I also love that like Simmons and Fitz had very different experiences here. Like Fitz is like, oh, things for here are kind of terrible. For Simmons, they weren't that bad because for her, it's like, oh, she was high the entire time. And then Fitz is like, wait, what's going on? What aren't you telling me? It's like, right, you haven't really broken down your experiences on Kitson. That's going to be an interesting story to tell, Fitz. But I love that Kitson was kind of like, okay, so what I'm going to do to you, Enoch, I'm going to sell you to the brothel. And he's like, I don't know how I feel about that. I love that. And I love the twisted game that was played. Basically, Simmons and Fitz, along with that other dude, were basically hooked up the guillotines, but basically they hold the chain, which is super messed up. The longer you hold on to it, the more chance you have, the more time you have to prevent your own execution. It's just like, it's a very morbid situation. I love the third dude being there, being like, oh yeah, like the fact of the matter is, it's like, oh wow, you're Terrence or whatever. He's like, oh, I would love to have a woman like you on my adventures or whatever. And Fitz is like, hey, and then the blade starts dropping a little bit more because he's losing focus and he's screaming. He's like, ah. I love it. It's like, shut up, dude. That's my future wife, technically current wife, because of the whole everything. it's a complicated situation, but she's with me, pal. Never went to that, but you can tell that that's what Fitz is, hey, meant, you know, so. But luckily they were saved by that lady, S.H.I.E.L.D, which that actress seems familiar. I was trying to pay attention to the names at the beginning, but I don't know. Not unless I missed her name, but it's like, she looks so familiar, but I just can't place her. But basically she wants Fitz and Simmons. You know, it just clicked in my head. I might be an idiot. It's just kind of an interesting thing. It just clicked in my head. Well, basically, she wants to retrieve some stuff that was stolen from her that's on Earth. She wants to get the crew and well, she wants Fitz and Simmons' help to get there because it's like, oh, it's like, oh, it's Earth. It's, you guys are Terran. So the thing is that I'm just clicking in my head. I'm like, you don't think she's the master of the Shrike, do you? Is that just like coincidence? I'm like, there's too much. I mean, it could just be like a new person to join the squad, which would be cool. But part of me is like, is she actually gonna be like the main antagonist behind all of this? Because they never actually described what the boss looked like. So that's what I'm curious. Like, could it just be that the boss of the Shrike just happens to disguise themselves to look the way she does potentially, S.H.I.E.L.D? I don't know. I'm curious about that because it didn't even click in my head until I'm sitting here talking about it. Like, I feel like that's what they're doing, but hey, I could be 100% wrong, and that's just, you know, some other thing. Because it's interesting, because it's like, oh, like the talking she has with Fitz and Simmons, and the fact is, she's getting the crew. That's because, like, they went to get the ship that was stolen from them originally earlier in the season. They're now getting it back, and they're kind of taking it back. And I love, like, Fitz and Simmons are talking at the same time. He's like, oh no, you go first. No, she's like, no, I'm sorry, you go first. It's like, oh, you sure? It's like, yeah, no, it's super adorable. But I'm wondering about that. I hope it's not the case. I just want her to kind of be like, hey, like, she's kind of like, almost kind of feels like a little bit of a space pirate type of situation going on there. But, I mean, maybe that's kind of the point. I don't know. It just seems like the big bad wouldn't be having a whole bunch of other, you wouldn't go through the trouble of bringing Fitz and Simmons back home. Like, I guess, I don't know. Maybe you have other plans on Earth before you go straight up destroying it. Maybe. Like I said, maybe it's just coincidence and they're just going to be allies for the fight to come. Like I said, this is me jumping to huge conclusions. We'll see whether that ends up being the case or not. But they do have to say goodbye to Enoch because for him it's like the Earth is saved and obviously Fitz has found a way back home. So his mission is complete. He still has to go help his people. And I do love that it's kind of like, you know, Fitz is kind of like, yeah, you kind of derailed my life a lot, but still thank you for everything, you know? And it's like, even Enoch being like, oh, you're welcome. And I love him being like, I won't miss you at all, Leopold Fitz. And Fitz is almost like, oh, what? He's like, I'm bluffing. And it's like, Enoch. Even giving them a way of communicating with him. I love it being like, oh yeah, you're not even going to say goodbye. And he's like, well, as, you know, an expression of, you know, you earthlings, goodbyes suck, and they do. And also, like, call me. And he's like, that's another one of your expressions. And it's like Enoch having to say goodbye to his best friend and everything. And, you know, even in Fitz's case, I have to admit, hey, you're kind of my best friend. It's like, like I said, the best friend thing is kind of getting thrown around, and I'm loving it. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where that takes us. I'm curious to see if we get to see any of Enoch's story, like him trying to get, like, the Chronicles, like, trying to find them a new world or whatever, like, saving his people. I'm curious, like, will we get any part of that story? Maybe we will, and now blend itself back into the Earth story. Maybe not. We'll see on that front. But obviously, another big part of things is everything on Earth, because everything kind of comes to a head because it's like, oh, here's May coming in with Sarge, and you have everyone looking, and it's just like, oh, weird and awkward for everyone because it's like, oh, dude looks like Coulson. And then you have Daisy being there like, oh, man, this is too weird. I got to get away from this. Which I love. We had the whole Deke situation. Deke trying to show off to her. Like, once again, Daisy doesn't realize that Deke's got a thing for her, but it's like, oh, like, which side note, Simmons, to our knowledge, never fully explained to Fitz, like, oh yeah, we have a grandson. Like, she started last episode, and we literally pick up with that mid-conversation this episode, but it's like, she never went into full details. I mean, to be fair, maybe it was something that happened that we just didn't get to see in the episode, but still. So, but like I love, he's trying to show off. He's like, oh, clearing his throat. He's showing off the shoes. She's like, yeah, nice shoes and everything. He's like, yeah, they're Jordans. It's like, oh yeah, he's the greatest. What? Like, he's revolutionary. And she's like, do you know who Jordan is? It's like, of course. He was the inventor of shoes. And she's like, sure, yeah. I'm like, I love it. But also, he's like, yeah, I'm super rich. I went into tech stuff and everything. But then, like, I just appreciate the fact is that, like, I think she's so oblivious to the fact is that Deke has a thing for her. I don't know. I get maybe she doesn't quite look at him that way, like, so I mean, the last time she was with someone was Lincoln, right? I think Lincoln was the last relationship she was in, technically speaking, because I guess technically you make the award situation, even though that wasn't her in the framework, that was technically him, and the Daisy that was from that system. But I don't know. It's also interesting too. I'm curious like how the framework's ever going to circle back, because obviously we see that Deke is messing with that present day, which I'm sure they're not going to be too happy about. Like, oh, we saw what happened last time with the framework. It's like, it's fine. Ada's not around, but still, I'm curious, is that going to play any shape or form going forward? But we'll see. But Daisy ends up informing Deke about what he didn't know about Fitz, and obviously, like, Deke went off on Mac because it's like, how could you literally not tell me that Fitz died? Obviously, it's like this whole multiverse theory, because like there's another Fitz out there and everything. Because the fact of the matter is, this is my grandfather. You should have told me, because I would have literally went with them to go rescue him. But it's like, the fact is, there wasn't time, and the fact of the matter is, you left anyway, and that kind of makes Deke feel bad, because it's like, yeah, I did leave, so I can't be all high and mighty. But at the same time, Mac is like, I understand how you feel. Fact of the matter is, when this is all done, all our resources are going into that, getting Fitz back, and you're going to be on that trip, which, as we know, not necessary considering the fact is Fitz is on his way back. Him and Simmons are back on their way. It's going to be interesting for Fitz to meet Deke for the first time, because not only is this him meeting, because to be fair, they met Deke in the future, but it wasn't until they got to present day that it's like, oh, found out about him being the grandchild and everything. So, but now it's kind of like interesting, because now it's the reverse of last season, because now it's like, oh, Fitz is going into this being like, oh wait, knowing ahead of time, like, oh, well, when Simmons points it out, like, oh yeah, this is Deke, our grandson. Oh wow, so like he gets to know about Deke that way. He kind of doesn't get to know the Deke that they got to know first, who kind of do whatever it takes to survive type of situation, which I guess you can make the argument kind of still exists in that regard. So there's that. There's the whole understanding what they're planning on doing about all of this, because Sarge is kind of like, you guys aren't prepared because you're going up against someone. If we had to put him in with some label, it'd be kind of like this monster that's coming. It's like a god, which Mac is like, fact of the matter is, we've gone up against people who thought that they were gods as well on actually many different occasions. I guess you can make the argument Hive kind of felt like that. Ada kind of played that role. Robbie's uncle was kind of borderlining that like that when he had the death hold and everything. I guess Cassius to a certain extent, and even I feel so bad because I'm blanking on his name. Talbot, jeez, I really had a brain fart on that one. Like, when he got souped up at the end of last season. So they've come across that before, but it's like, Max, like, anytime has always been ego, but it's like, nah, this is probably like the closest thing you'll come to a full-blown, like, god potential. I mean, to be fair, gods we already know exist in the MCU anyway, because Thor, but once again, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was like, nah, Asgardians, they're aliens, they're not gods. Nevertheless. So there's that whole situation. So, and obviously Sarge knows that, like, oh, he's kind of in charge here because he knows all the information. It's like, oh, when it's all said and done, you guys aren't going to know what to do. You're going to end up turning to me, which sadly at the end of the episode, they kind of end up doing that. But I'll kind of break it down going forward. Like, obviously, like, Jocko's situation, kind of understanding his situation better. Like, he wasn't even, like, a warrior. Like, their family were bakers, but he's, like, the only one left. And the fact is, like, he was actually kind of, even though he's as big as he is, he was essentially the runt of the litter, and so understanding who and what he is exactly is interesting, because later on we see that he's able to breathe fire. It's like, okay, so he was literally turning into a dragon. Would it have gone further if they hadn't stopped him, like his transformation? Would he go in full-blown dragon? Like, once again, it's like, what are they? Like, it seems like they are from different worlds, so does that mean... Because Sarge doesn't seem like he remembers anything from his past, so it's like, is he something else? Once again, because it even comes up later on. It's like he has him and Coulson's DNA match. So could he actually be Coulson? That he just has, once again, did he kind of get Captain Marvel? Like, she had, Carol's memories were messed with and everything like that. So that's what I'm wondering. That's always been kind of my thought of, like, is that kind of where that is? Or could it just be purely a situation of, like, why is there another person out there that looks exactly like Coulson? Especially because Sarge is saying, like, oh, I'm 100 years old and everything. So it's a whole thing. So that's interesting. I do like that. It's like, oh yeah, Jocko is doing his thing, and lo and behold, here comes the heavy hitter, Daisy. Bam! Finish that up. We see Mac kind of extinguishing the flames and everything, and it's like, his attempt to escape, Sargis didn't work out. And you can almost tell it, but it seems like he is very smart because he knows that he's more informed about the situation. But I think even he was still kind of caught off guard by the fact that, oh, you stopped that, huh? Oh, you got into my device and know how to track the Shrike, huh? But I think there was a part of him that was kind of impressed, but he knew what that meant. Because obviously they're trying to save people. And I even liked what Mac did because, May actually gave him the idea to kind of psychologically mess with him, because kind of catch him off kilter by showing him, like, oh, here's Coulson. And it's like, oh, well, you're trying to, like, bother me. It's like, no, just to show you the difference between the two of you. The fact is, this man was all about saving lives, whereas you kind of cast people aside. The fact is, no one matters to you. What about your team? Jocko's sick. He's not going to willing to take help unless you get the order. And he's like, no. I mean, obviously he knew what was happening to Jocko, but at the same time, I guess that's why Jocko kind of stays high all the time. Like, it seemed like he was like sniffing stuff, and I guess he kind of keeps his dragon self or whatever his situation is at bay, but going prolonged time without it kind of awoken it. So that's kind of the whole thing. But still, it's like, you don't care about your people, Mac. It's like, the fact that matters, we're going to save people. Like, yeah, we didn't know about the Shrike and their whole thing of, like, oh yeah, because he even tried to blame Yo-Yo, being like, oh yeah, what happened to that dude you care about? That was on you for pulling the knife out so soon before the Shrike was completely dead, which pissed her off. And which obviously things are still awkward between Yo-Yo and Mac. So, and then there's the whole situation of the two capture Shrikes. Like, I guess if they get close enough to each other, like, they do what they did. Like, essentially they it seems like they kill each other to act, because they kind of get near each other to activate, but like they resonate in a way, I guess, to activate themselves. And once they do, they kill the other, and it just activates that. Like, there is some planning to this. Like, it doesn't seem like it's just pure nature. It seems like they planned things out to go to that extent because they knew that it would cause the most amount of damage that way. Luckily for that agent that was with Yo-Yo, well, not the first dude, but the lady, like, one of them was coming towards her, and Yo-Yo grabbed it with her arm and crushed it, because it seems like they can't handle the code. Because the whole point was, like, not to just drop them on the ground because they feed off of life. Putting them somewhere they could just spread like that would have just caused more damage. But the whole thing is, like, they don't like being frozen, so go high into the altitude till they freeze, and it break. So I'm like, I guess we don't have to worry about them thawing out, I guess, because there's so many broken pieces. Or to be fair, it's also about the Shrike on the inside. So as long as it's dead at the core, even with all those like spikes and things coming out, those things are still on the inside. So if they're dead on the inside, it's fine. So that's a whole thing in itself. So that's very interesting. Because I almost let it slip my mind. I was like, oh yeah, where's Bits in that anyway? And I'm like, right, I forgot. He's investigating like the monoliths and stuff like that. Wasn't that what he was investigating? Like, he was going to other places to investigate some stuff. I'd almost completely forgot about that being a thing. But nevertheless. But all that had to happen, you know. It's like, oh, we saved the day, but Mac has to concede to Sarge to listen to him and everything, because he's the one that knows more about the situation. It's going to be interesting because, once again, it's like bringing everyone together. It's like we got Sarge and his team working with S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, it seems like they're probably just going to try and operate on their own, but obviously S.H.I.E.L.D's probably going to interfere and try not to let them kill anyone. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see where things are going to go in that regard. But other things kind of got brought up I thought was kind of fascinating. Obviously, like Daisy dealing with the whole, oh yeah, like, he looks like Coulson thing. She doesn't want to talk about it or deal with it. And Mac with the whole Yo-Yo thing, which, you know, you have... You know, because for her, like, you know, for Daisy, it's like, oh, yeah, look at you taking charge and everything, which is like, he's like, yeah, but the fact of the matter is, it's like, yeah, you guys raise your hands and everything about me taking over the job, which easier back then. Like, the moment you get the job, it becomes a lot harder, and he wants Daisy to be there by his side with all of this, because it's like, oh, I need you to be there because you tell me directly. It's like, you know who else will tell you directly, Mac? Yo-Yo. And he's like, well, that's, once again, that's complicated. And it's like, you two obviously still love each other, but for Mac, it's that thing of like, he has to compartmentalize, because for him, it's like, he feels like if he loses focus on the whole thing about just focusing on Yo-Yo, because if he lets his guard down, lets his heart show through with that whole situation, that he's afraid that he's not going to be as prepared for what needs to be done. His focus will be diverted, and his, and people's lives are in his hand. And I think it's a combination of like finding that perfect balance, because you have Daisy telling him, it's like, even Coulson wasn't like the most sure leader. He questioned himself. He was just very good at hiding it. But the fact is, I think there's that perfect balance of like, because Yo-Yo is someone that you care about and want to protect, and so is everyone else that's a part of your team. So they don't have to be two separate things. They can all be one thing. But once again, it's that thing of like, oh, but love can interfere. If I make one mistake, if I make one misstep, if I, like I said, let my guard down even for a moment, there could be, so many lives could be lost because of that. So I'm very interested to see, like I said, full-blown. I also like that Daisy's whole situation is still a secret. I mean, not unless Jocko ends up saying anything, but they don't know what she's capable of. I mean, they're going to need her against this potential leader that's coming. I mean, how would they plan on, like, because that's what I'm curious about, too. It's like, this leader, like, is it just the Shrikes that have destroyed these planets that they've been on before, other worlds, or was it the leader itself come to destroy it? Like, I'm curious, like, what went down exactly, because it's like, what makes you think you can kill it this time, especially considering the fact that you think this thing is a god? Like, what makes them so sure that they can do this, Sure as hell won't be able to do it alone. So it is kind of interesting seeing all these different paths kind of ultimately coming together, because it's like, Earth is this centerfold of all this, like, all roads lead back to Earth, whether it's like, everything that's happening in space leading back there, in many different regards, and obviously potentially 3 different groups joining up, Fitz and Simmons returning along with everyone at S.H.I.E.L.D, and obviously Sarge and his team. I'm very interested to see what the potential cooperation is going to look like going forward. What's this going to be like once Fitz and Simmons return, especially because Simmons is obviously, like everyone else, living with the fact is that, like, oh yeah, Coulson's gone, and then you have Fitz just recently dealing with that, finding out about it. He's still processing that, and now it's like, wait, there's some dude here who looks like, so it's like he's got even less time to process all of this, and it's just going to be weird. So I am very, very interested to see where this all takes us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.